The gunshot tore through the Montana Territory's quiet morning like thunder, causing a flock of startled birds to rise from the cottonwoods near the well, where Jessamine Reed stood frozen, water pail clutched in her trembling hands. 3 men on horseback emerged from the tree line, their faces weathered and cruel beneath the brims of dusty hats. Jessamine's heart hammered against her ribs. She'd heard stories of the Blackwater Gang terrorizing homesteads across the territory, but in the 8 months since she'd arrived to claim her late uncle's land, trouble had kept its distance until now. "Well, ain't you a pretty little thing?" drawled the man in the center, a nasty scar cutting across his left cheek. "All alone out here, fetching water like a good girl." The other 2 men laughed, the sound as cold as the creek water filling Jessamine's bucket. She took a step backward, her gaze darting toward the cabin where her rifle leaned against the porch too far away to reach. "I don't want any trouble," she said, hating how her voice wavered. "Take what you want and leave." "Oh, we'll take what we want all right," said the scarred man, dismounting with a predatory grace that made Jessamine's blood run cold. "And what we want is you fetchin' water for us from now on. This well sits on what's gonna be our land. You'll be our caretaker." Montana, 1876, was no place for a woman alone. Jessamine had heard it countless times since leaving Boston after her parents' deaths, but she'd been determined to make a life for herself on her uncle's claim, to prove everyone wrong. Now, as the 3 outlaws advanced, she wondered if all those warnings had been right. "I think you boys should reconsider your plans." The voice came from behind her, steady and deep. Jessamine didn't dare turn around, couldn't take her eyes off the threats before her, but she heard the distinctive sound of a rifle hammer being cocked. The scarred man's eyes narrowed, looking past her. "This ain't your business, stranger. When you threaten a lady at my watering hole, you make it my business," came the reply. "Miss Reed here won't be fetching any water for you. Not today, not ever." The outlaws hesitated, exchanging glances. The scarred one, clearly the leader, flexed his fingers near his holstered pistol. "3 against 1, mister. Bad odds." A soft chuckle came from behind Jessamine. "I count differently. 3 criminals against 1 honest man seems about fair to me." There was a pause, then, "Miss Reed, I'd appreciate if you'd step aside now." Jessamine finally dared to glance over her shoulder. The man standing there was tall, his broad shoulders squared beneath a worn leather vest. Sandy brown hair peeked from beneath a wide-brimmed hat, and his face, though young perhaps 25 or 26, held a quiet confidence that steadied her racing heart. The rifle in his hands looked well used, pointed unwavering at the outlaws. She moved carefully to the side, clutching her water pail like a shield. The scarred outlaw spat on the ground. "You're making a mistake, cowboy." "Gabriel Sutton don't make mistakes about vermin like you," the stranger Gabriel replied evenly. "Now mount up and ride out. This land belongs to Miss Reed, and I won't tell you again." For a tense moment, Jessamine thought the outlaws would draw their weapons. Her breath caught in her throat. But something in Gabriel's stance, or perhaps the steady way he held that rifle, made the leader reconsider. "This ain't over," he growled, climbing back onto his horse. His companions followed suit, their faces twisted with anger. "For your sake, it better be," Gabriel called after them as they rode away. Only when they disappeared into the trees did he lower his rifle. Jessamine released the breath she'd been holding. "Thank you, Mr. Sutton. I don't know what would have happened if—" "Gabe," he interrupted, turning to her with eyes the color of a summer sky. "Just, Gabe is fine." "Jessamine Reed," she replied, offering her hand in a gesture that felt oddly formal after what had just transpired. "Though it seems you already know my name." His hand engulfed hers, calloused but gentle. Hard not to know the woman brave enough to run a homestead all by herself. A small smile touched his lips. "I've got a place 2 miles east. Been meaning to pay a neighborly visit, though I didn't expect it to be quite like this." Jessamine found herself returning his smile, despite the danger that had just passed. "Well, Mr. Sut Gabe, I'd say this calls for coffee, at the very least. Would you care to join me?" "I'd be honored, Miss Reed." "Jessamine," she corrected, surprising herself with her boldness. "Just Jessamine is fine." As they walked together toward her cabin, water pail between them, Jessamine couldn't shake the feeling that something important had just happened, something beyond the obvious rescue. Something that made her heart beat just a little faster when Gabe's hand accidentally brushed against hers. "Those men," she said after a moment, "will they come back?" Gabe's expression grew serious. "The Blackwater Gang doesn't give up easily, but neither do I." He glanced at her, eyes softening. "And from what I hear, neither do you." For the first time since the Outlaws appeared, Jessamine felt truly safe. Jessamine's cabin was modest but well kept. As she stoked the fire in her small iron stove, she was acutely aware of Gabriel Sutton's presence filling the one-room structure. He stood with his hat in his hands, taking in the patchwork curtains she'd sewn herself, and the small bookshelf crammed with volumes she'd brought from Boston. "Nice place," he said, and she could tell he meant it. "You've done a lot with it." "Uncle Henry wasn't much for decorating," she replied, setting the coffee pot on the stove. "When I arrived, there wasn't even a proper bed, just a straw mattress on the floor." Gabe nodded appreciatively at the sturdy bed frame in the corner with its colorful quilt. "You built that yourself?" "I did." She couldn't help the pride in her voice. "The mercantile in town sells lumber, and the owner's wife lent me her husband's tools. It took 3 tries to get it right." His eyes crinkled at the corners when he smiled. "Determined woman." "Stubborn, my mother would have said." Jessamine gestured to the table. "Please, sit. The coffee won't take long." Gabe set his rifle by the door before taking a seat, placing his hat on the table beside him. Without it, she could see his hair was the color of wheat, with streaks of gold where the sun had bleached it. He couldn't be more than 27, she guessed, though his eyes held an older wisdom. "How long have you been in Montana Territory?" he asked, as she set out 2 tin cups. 8 months. I came after my uncle passed. He'd written to my family for years about the beauty of this place, though my parents never visited." She paused, the familiar pang of loss washing over her. "After they died, influenza took them both. Last winter, there was nothing keeping me in Boston." "I'm sorry about your family," Gabe said quietly. Jessamine nodded her thanks. Uncle Henry's claim letter was among their things. I figured I had as much right to try my hand at homesteading as anyone. She poured the coffee when it was ready, the rich aroma filling the cabin. "And you? Are you from these parts originally?" "Texas born and raised," Gabe replied, accepting the cup she offered. "Came north with a cattle drive 3 years ago and decided to stay. Bought my place from an old trapper ready to move on." He took a sip of coffee, his eyes widening slightly. "This is good." "Secret ingredient," Jessamine smiled. "Cinnamon." They fell into easy conversation as they drank their coffee. Gabe told her about his small ranch, the dozen cattle he kept, and his plans to expand. Jessamine shared stories of her struggles and successes on the homestead, the vegetable garden that was finally thriving, the chicken coop she'd built, the roof she'd learned to patch after spring rains found every weakness. "You've accomplished a lot on your own," Gabe said admiringly. "Most men wouldn't have managed half as well." "Most men don't have people telling them they can't do something every step of the way," Jessamine replied, more bitterness in her tone than she'd intended. "Nothing motivates quite like proving others wrong." Gabe's smile was understanding. "I'd wager you've been proving people wrong your whole life." "Only when they deserve it," she refilled their cups. "Now, about those men at the well." His expression sobered immediately. "The Blackwater Gang. They've been terrorizing these parts for months now. They target isolated homesteads, intimidate owners into leaving, then claim the land for themselves. Sometimes they're less than gentle about it." "Have they killed people?" Gabe hesitated before answering. 2 homesteaders over in Elk Valley refused to leave. They were found shot in their beds. A chill ran through Jessamine despite the warmth of the stove. "And the law?" "Marshal Harris tries, but he's one man with too much territory. The gang stays mobile, never camping twice in the same place." Gabe leaned forward, his eyes intent on hers. "Jessamine, they'll be back. Men like that don't take kindly to being refused." "I won't be frightened off my land," she said firmly, though fear twisted in her stomach. "I'm not suggesting you should be, but you might consider accepting some help." He seemed to choose his next words carefully. "I could stay a while, just until we're sure they've moved on to easier pickings." Jessamine stared at him, The offer was both shocking and tempting. A respectable woman living alone with a man she'd just met would scandalize even the most progressive people in these parts. Yet the memory of those outlaws' eyes on her made her skin crawl. "I couldn't ask that of you," she said finally. "You have your own place to tend. My hand Rick can manage for a few days." Gabe's gaze was steady. "I don't much like the idea of riding away knowing you're here alone with those men out there." Something warm unfurled in Jessamine's chest at his concern. Still, she hesitated. People would talk. The corner of Gabe's mouth lifted. People always talk. Question is whether you care more about their opinions or your safety. Put that way, the choice seemed clear. Still, Jessamine wasn't accustomed to accepting help, especially from a man she'd only just met, no matter how trustworthy he seemed. "I have a barn," she said finally. "You could stay there. It's not much, but it's perfect," Gabe assured her. "I should ride back to my place to let Rick know and grab some supplies. I can be back before sundown." Relief and something else. Something she wasn't ready to examine too closely flooded through Jessamine. "Thank you, Gabe. Truly." He nodded, standing and reaching for his hat. Just being neighborly? But as their eyes met, they both knew it was already more than that. True to his word, Gabe returned before sunset, saddlebags full and rifle across his lap. Jessamine had spent the afternoon unable to concentrate on her chores, her eyes constantly straying to the tree line where the outlaws had disappeared. Every snap of a twig, every rustle of leaves had her hand reaching for the shotgun she now kept within arm's reach. Seeing Gabe ride up to her cabin sent a wave of relief through her that was almost embarrassing in its intensity. "Any trouble?" he asked, dismounting in one fluid motion. "Not a sign of them," Jessamine replied, watching as he unsaddled his horse, a handsome buckskin gelding. "I've prepared supper, if you're hungry." "Starving," Gabe admitted with a grin that transformed his face, making him look younger. "Just let me get Jupiter here, settled first." Jessamine watched as he cared for his horse with gentle efficiency, speaking to the animal in low, soothing tones. A man could be judged by how he treated his horse, her uncle had once written in a letter. By that measure, Gabriel Sutton was a good man indeed. Supper was a simple affair, rabbit stew with wild onions, and the last of the biscuits she'd baked that morning, but Gabe ate with such appreciation that Jessamine couldn't help feeling pleased with her cooking. They talked easily through the meal, and she found herself sharing stories about her life in Boston that she hadn't spoken of since arriving in Montana. "You miss it?" Gabe asked as he helped her clear the dishes away. "The city life, I mean." Jessamine considered the question seriously. "I miss certain things, libraries, music, not having to chop my own firewood." She smiled. "But there's something about this place, the open sky, the quiet, the sense that I'm building something that's entirely mine, that I wouldn't trade for all the conveniences of Boston." "Know exactly what you mean," Gabe said, his eyes meeting hers with such understanding that Jessamine felt a connection spark between them, deep and immediate. After the dishes were washed and dried, an awkward moment stretched between them. The day was ending, and propriety dictated that Gabe should retire to the barn. Yet neither seemed eager to end the evening. "I have a deck of cards," Jessamine offered impulsively. "Do you play?" Gabe's face lit up. "I've been known to enjoy a hand or two." They sat at her small table, playing hand after hand of poker by lamplight, using dried beans as betting chips. Jessamine had learned to play from her father, who believed his daughter should be skilled in all manner of games, proper or not. She suspected Gabe was letting her win at first, until she took 3 hands in a row and his competitive spirit emerged. "Where did a proper Boston lady learn to play poker like this?" he asked, shaking his head as she raked in another pile of beans. "My father was anything but conventional," she replied. "He believed a woman should know how to navigate any situation from a society ball to a gentleman's card game." She shuffled the deck with practiced ease. "Mother was scandalized, of course, but she came around eventually." "They sound like remarkable people." "They were." Jessamine dealt the next hand. "What about your family?" Gabe's expression grew distant. "Lost pa to the war when I was 12. Ma held on for another 5 years before consumption took her. It was just me and my brother after that, working any job we could find to keep food on the table." "Your brother, is he nearby?" A shadow crossed Gabe's face. Sam was killed in a saloon fight in Abilene 3 years back. That's when I decided to head north with that cattle drive. Needed a fresh start somewhere Sam had never been. I'm sorry, Jessamine said softly, recognizing the same loneliness in him that she carried. Perhaps that was what had drawn her to trust him so quickly, the recognition of a fellow soul who understood loss. Their eyes held for a long moment, something unspoken passing between them. Then Gabe cleared his throat and looked down at his cards. I believe I have a winning hand this time, he said, his voice slightly rougher than before. They played a few more hands before the lateness of the hour couldn't be ignored any longer. Gabe stood, stretching his tall frame. I should turn in. Dawn comes early. Jessamine nodded, suddenly aware of how empty the cabin would feel without him. I've put extra blankets in the barn. The nights get cold. I'll be fine, he assured her. He hesitated at the door. Lock this behind me and keep that shotgun close. I will, she promised. Good night, Gabe. Good night, Jessamine. As she barred the door behind him, Jessamine was surprised to find herself touching her lips with her fingertips, wondering what it might be like to feel his kiss. The thought startled her with its intensity. She'd known the man less than a day, yet already he occupied her thoughts in ways no one ever had before. Shaking her head at her own foolishness, Jessamine prepared for bed, grateful for Gabe's presence nearby, but determined not to read too much into his kindness. Men like Gabriel Sutton didn't fall for women like her. He was being neighborly, nothing more. Yet, as she drifted off to sleep, it was his sky-blue eyes and gentle smile that followed her into her dreams. The next morning dawned clear and cool, with the promise of heat later in the day. Jessamine rose early, as was her habit, and was surprised to find the fire already stoked in the stove and coffee brewing. Gabe stood at her small window, rifle cradled in his arms, watching the sunrise paint the Montana sky in shades of gold and rose. You're up early, she said, hastily tying her wrapper more securely around her cotton nightgown. He turned, and if her state of undress bothered him, he didn't show it. Old habits. Never could sleep past sunrise. His gaze returned to the window. It's quiet out there. No sign of trouble. That's good, Jessamine said, moving to pour them both coffee. I need to collect eggs and milk the cow. Then I thought I'd work in the garden. I'll come with you, Gabe said, accepting the coffee she offered. Better not to be alone outside, even for routine chores. They fell into an easy rhythm as the morning progressed. Gabe helped Jessamine with her chores, his capable hands making quick work of tasks that would have taken her twice as long. They weeded the garden together, Gabe showing a surprising knowledge of vegetables and their needs. My mother always kept a garden, he explained, carefully removing bindweed from around the base of a tomato plant. Said a boy who couldn't tell a weed from a bean plant wasn't much use to anyone. Jessamine laughed. She sounds like a practical woman. She was. His expression softened with memory. Would have liked you, I think. She valued determination. The casual compliment warmed Jessamine more than it should have. And what do you value, Gabe Sutton? He looked up at her, squinting slightly in the morning sun. Honesty, courage. His eyes held hers. The ability to see beauty in small things. Something in his gaze made Jessamine's breath catch. She looked away first, suddenly very interested in the row of carrots before her. By midday they'd completed most of the necessary chores. Jessamine prepared a simple lunch of bread, cheese, and dried apple slices, which they ate in the shade of the large oak tree beside the cabin. The day had grown warm, and Gabe had removed his vest, his shirt sleeves rolled up to expose strong forearms tanned by the sun. I should check my snare line this afternoon, Jessamine said as they finished their meal. There's a stream about half a mile west where I set traps for rabbits. Gabe nodded. We'll go together after I repair that loose board on your chicken coop. He'd noticed it that morning and had insisted on fixing it. Can't have foxes getting at your hens. Jessamine wanted to object to his assumption that she needed an escort on her own property, but the memory of the outlaw's threatening presence kept her silent. Better safe than proud, at least until the danger passed. As Gabe worked on the chicken coop, Jessamine found herself watching him more than the mending in her lap. There was something compelling about the way he moved, confident but never showy, each action deliberate and effective. When he removed his hat to wipe his brow, the sunlight caught in his hair, turning it to gold. He glanced up, catching her stare, and Jessamine quickly looked down at her needle and thread, cheeks warming. Later, as they walked together to check her snare line, the conversation turned to their futures. Gabe spoke of his hopes to expand his ranch, perhaps raise horses as well as cattle. Jessamine shared her plans to add beehives come spring, and maybe plant an apple orchard on the north side of her property. "You plan to stay here then?" Gabe asked as they crossed a small meadow thick with wildflowers. "Make this your permanent home?" "I do," Jessamine replied without hesitation. "This land is mine now, truly mine in a way nothing in Boston ever was. A woman alone there is always someone's daughter, someone's sister, someone's responsibility. Here, I answer only to myself." Gabe nodded thoughtfully. "Freedom's a powerful thing." "It is," Jessamine agreed. "Though sometimes I wonder if—" She stopped herself, suddenly self-conscious. "Wonder what?" Gabe prompted gently. Jessamine sighed. "If I'm being selfish, wanting a life that's just my own. Back east, women my age are expected to marry, have children, build a family. Sometimes I think perhaps I'm running from those responsibilities rather than embracing my independence." They had reached the stream, where Jessamine's crude but effective snares were set along the bank. One held a plump rabbit, which Gabe carefully removed and dispatched with quick mercy before Jessamine could even offer to do it herself. "Wanting to determine the shape of your own life isn't selfish," he said as he reset the snare. "And having a family doesn't have to mean giving up your independence." He glanced at her. "Not if you find the right partner." Something in his tone made Jessamine's heart beat faster. "Is that what you're looking for? A partner rather than just a wife?" Gabe stood, the rabbit secured at his belt. His eyes, when they met hers, were serious. "I've seen too many marriages where the woman becomes little more than property. My parents weren't like that. They worked side by side, respected each other's strengths." He shook his head. "I couldn't be with someone who expected less." "Nor could I," Jessamine said quietly. They stood there by the stream, looking at each other with new understanding, a moment of possibility stretching between them. Then the crack of a rifle shot shattered the peace of the afternoon. Gabe reacted instantly, pulling Jessamine down into the tall grass beside the stream. "Stay down," he hissed, his body covering hers protectively as another shot rang out, splintering bark from a nearby tree. "The Blackwater Gang," Jessamine whispered, heart pounding. "Has to be," Gabe replied grimly. He peered cautiously over the grass. "They're up on that ridge, maybe 300 yards away. Too far for accurate pistol fire, but their rifles are another matter." "We're trapped," Jessamine realized. The stream bank offered minimal cover, and the open meadow they had crossed provided none at all. "Not quite," Gabe said, his eyes scanning their surroundings. "See those rocks downstream? If we stay low and use the bank as cover, we can make it there. From there, we can work our way around through those trees and circle back to your cabin." Another shot kicked up dirt just feet from where they lay. Jessamine flinched but nodded her understanding. "Let's go." They crawled through the grass, keeping their bodies as flat to the ground as possible. Jessamine's skirt caught on brambles, and her hands were soon scratched and muddy, but fear kept her moving. Gabe led the way, occasionally reaching back to help her over rougher patches. When they reached the rocks, they paused, breathing hard. No more shots had come for several minutes. "They might be moving positions," Gabe whispered. "We need to keep going." They made their way carefully through the trees, using the thick trunks for cover. Jessamine's heart nearly stopped when they heard voices ahead, rough male voices, too close for comfort. Gabe pulled her behind a large pine, his finger to his lips. They stood pressed together, barely breathing. As two men passed not 20 feet away, members of the Blackwater Gang, rifles in hand. "Said to check the stream," one was saying. "Boss thinks they went to ground there." "Woman ain't worth all this trouble," grumbled the other. "Plenty of other homesteads ripe for picking." "Boss wants her land particular, says the water rights alone make it valuable." The man spat. "Besides, nobody makes a fool of Silas Reed and lives to tell about it." The men moved on, their voices fading. Jessamine realized she was trembling, not just from fear, but from fury. These men thought they could simply take what was hers, what she'd worked so hard to build. "Silas Reed," Gabe whispered. That's the leader, the one with the scar. He's not getting my land, Jessamine said with quiet determination. No matter what. Gabe's arm tightened around her waist. We need to get back to your cabin. I left my rifle there, and you'll be safer behind solid walls. They moved more carefully now, aware that gang members were scattered through the woods. It took nearly an hour to cover ground that would normally have taken minutes. Twice more they had to hide as outlaws passed nearby. By the time the cabin came into view, the sun was beginning to lower toward the horizon. Something's wrong, Gabe muttered, pulling Jessamine to a stop at the edge of the trees. The door's open. Jessamine's blood ran cold. They've been inside. Stay here, Gabe ordered, drawing his pistol. If anything happens, run for the Miller place 2 miles south. Don't look back. I'm not letting you go alone, Jessamine protested, reaching for the knife she kept in her boot, a habit her uncle had taught her through his letters. This is my home. Gabe looked like he wanted to argue, but the determination in her eyes must have convinced him. Stay behind me. If I say run, you run. Promise me. Jessamine nodded reluctantly. They approached the cabin cautiously, Gabe moving with the silent grace of a man accustomed to stalking prey. The door hung partially open, swinging slightly in the breeze. Inside, Jessamine could see overturned furniture and scattered belongings. Gabe checked the interior thoroughly before allowing her inside. The destruction made Jessamine's throat tight with anger and violation. Her books had been thrown to the floor, her mattress slashed. The precious china teacup that had been her mother's lay in pieces by the stove. They've taken my rifle and shotgun, Gabe said, his voice hard, and your food stores are gone. They're trying to drive us out, Jessamine realized. Make it impossible to stay. They won't succeed, Gabe said firmly. His eyes met hers. I promise you that, Jessamine. She believed him. Despite the danger, despite the destruction around them, she believed him. In that moment, something shifted between them, the shared peril and shared resolve creating a bond that felt unbreakable. We need to prepare, Gabe said, already moving to barricade the broken door. They'll be back tonight. Silas Reed isn't a man who gives up easily. Neither am I, Jessamine said, retrieving her knife from a hidden compartment beneath a floorboard, one the outlaws had missed. She held it up. And I still have this. Gabe's face broke into an admiring smile. You are something else, Jessamine Reed. As darkness fell, they prepared as best they could. Gabe moved furniture to create barricades at the windows. Jessamine gathered what weapons remained: her knife, Gabe's pistol, and a heavy iron poker from the fireplace. They worked silently, efficiently, like partners who had known each other for years rather than days. When there was nothing left to do but wait, they sat together in the darkness, the only light coming from the banked fire in the stove. Outside, an owl called, a hauntingly lonely sound in the night. Jessamine, Gabe said softly, his face half in shadow. If we make it through this, when we make it through this, I'd like to call on you properly. Her heart skipped a beat. Call on me? Court you, he clarified, his voice low and earnest. I know we've only just met, but I feel as though... He trailed off, searching for words. As though I've known you much longer. As though this you and me, it matters. Jessamine reached for his hand in the darkness. It matters to me, too, she whispered. And yes, I'd like that very much. His fingers tightened around hers. In another time, another place. This moment might have led to a kiss. But the threat surrounding them kept them vigilant, even as the connection between them deepened. They'll come from the west, Gabe said after a while, his tactical mind returning to their situation. The terrain offers better cover. Jessamine nodded. The moon will rise in about an hour. They might wait until then. Or they might use the full darkness to their advantage, Gabe added. He squeezed her hand once more before releasing it. We should take positions. I'll watch the front, you take the back window. They settled in for the wait, tension filling the small cabin. Outside, the night sounds continued: crickets chirping, the occasional rustle of leaves in the breeze. Too normal, too peaceful for the danger they knew was coming. The attack, when it came, was sudden and violent. A flaming arrow struck the roof, instantly igniting the dry wood. Shots followed, peppering the cabin from multiple directions. They're trying to burn us out, Jessamine shouted above the noise. Gabe was already moving, grabbing the water bucket. We need to douse the flames. Jessamine reached for a blanket to help smother the fire that was quickly spreading across the roof. But as she moved toward the door, a bullet splintered the wood beside her head. "Get down!" Gabe yelled, pulling her to the floor as more shots tore through the cabin walls. The smoke was thickening, making it difficult to breathe. Fire crackled overhead, sections of burning roof beginning to fall into the cabin. "We can't stay here," Gabe coughed. "We need to run for it." "Where?" Jessamine asked, her eyes stinging from the smoke. "The barn. It's stone on 3 sides, better protection." He checked his pistol. "I'll go first. Draw their fire. You run for the barn as soon as I give the signal." "We go together, or not at all," Jessamine insisted, gripping his arm. "I won't leave you behind." The look Gabe gave her was filled with such tender admiration that even amidst the chaos, Jessamine's heart responded. "Together then," he agreed. "On my count. 1, 2, 3. They burst from the cabin into the night, immediately drawing fire from the darkness. Gabe fired back, his shots precise despite the poor visibility. They ran zigzagging toward the barn, bullets kicking up dirt at their feet. They were halfway there when Gabe stumbled, a pained grunt escaping his lips. Jessamine turned back, horrified to see blood darkening his sleeve. "Keep going," he urged, regaining his footing. "It's just a graze." They reached the barn, throwing themselves inside and barring the heavy door behind them. Gabe's breathing was labored, but he immediately moved to secure the small windows. "Let me see your arm," Jessamine insisted, tearing a strip from her petticoat to use as a bandage. "It's nothing," Gabe protested, but allowed her to roll up his sleeve. The bullet had cut a deep furrow along his upper arm, bleeding freely but not life-threatening. "Nothing," Jessamine muttered as she bound the wound tightly. Men and their stubborn pride. Despite their situation, Gabe's mouth quirked in a half-smile. "Pot, kettle," he said softly. Outside, men's voices called to each other. The outlaws were regrouping, planning their next move. Through the barn's small window, Jessamine could see her cabin fully engulfed in flames now, the fire casting an eerie glow over the clearing. "Everything I own is in there," she said, her voice hollow. "Years of work, of dreams, burning to ash." Gabe's hand found hers in the darkness. "Buildings can be rebuilt. Land remains." His eyes held hers. "As long as we're alive, nothing is lost that can't be regained." A movement outside caught Jessamine's attention. "They're surrounding the barn," she whispered. "Silas!" Gabe called out suddenly, his voice carrying through the night. "This ends now, you and me face to face." There was a pause, then a rough laugh from outside. "Why would I do that when I've got you trapped, cowboy?" "Because you're a coward hiding behind your men," Gabe replied coldly. "A real man would settle this himself, not send others to do his dirty work." The silence that followed was tense. Jessamine could almost feel the outlaw leader's fury at the insult. "You've got 1 minute to come out alone," Silas finally called. "Or we burn the barn with both of you inside it." "Don't!" Jessamine pleaded, gripping Gabe's good arm. "He'll kill you." Gabe's expression was resolute. "I don't plan on dying today." He checked his pistol, only 2 bullets remained. "But I need you to promise me something. If this goes wrong, run for the trees behind the barn. There's a small gap in the back wall where the mortar's crumbled. You can squeeze through." "I won't leave you," Jessamine insisted. "You will if you have to," Gabe said firmly. "Your life matters more than your land, Jessamine, more than anything." The intensity in his eyes made her throat tight with emotion. "Yours matters too," she whispered. Gabe's hand cupped her cheek, his touch impossibly gentle given the circumstances. "I've never met anyone like you," he said softly. "And that's worth fighting for." Before she could respond, he leaned in and kissed her brief but tender, a promise and a goodbye all at once. Then he was moving toward the barn door, pistol ready. "Silas," he called, "I'm coming out. Anyone shoots, your boss dies first." With one last look at Jessamine, Gabe unbarred the door and stepped outside, pistol held carefully at his side. Jessamine moved to the window, heart in her throat. By the light of the burning cabin, she could see Silas Reed step forward from the darkness, his scarred face twisted in a malicious grin. 6 or 7 men stood behind him, weapons trained on Gabe. "Drop the gun, cowboy," Silas ordered. "After you," Gabe replied evenly. Silas laughed. "You're in no position to negotiate." "Aren't I?" Gabe's voice was calm. "My hand's faster than yours, Reed. You might kill me, but you'll be dead before I hit the ground." The two men faced each other, neither moving. The tension stretched, palpable even from where Jessamine watched. Then, in the distance, the sound of galloping horses broke the silence. "Boss!" one of the outlaws called. "Riders coming, lots of them." Confusion crossed Silas's face, quickly replaced by alarm, as torches appeared on the road leading to the homestead, a dozen or more, moving fast. "It's the marshal!" another outlaw shouted. "And he's got men with him." Panic erupted among the Blackwater Gang. Some men ran for their horses, while others raised their weapons, uncertain which threat to address first. Silas Reed's momentary distraction was all Gabe needed. In one fluid motion, he raised his pistol and fired. The outlaw leader crumpled to the ground, clutching his shoulder in agony. Chaos followed. Shots were fired wildly as the outlaws scattered before the approaching riders. Gabe dove for cover behind the water trough as bullets tore into the ground around him. Jessamine could wait no longer. Gripping her knife, she slipped through the barn door and ran in a crouch toward Gabe's position. A bullet whizzed past her ear, but she didn't slow until she reached his side. "What are you doing?" he demanded, pulling her down beside him. "Being your partner," she replied simply, her knife ready. A shadow fell across them. Jessamine looked up to see one of the outlaws standing over them, rifle aimed at Gabe's head. Without hesitation, she lashed out with her knife, catching the man across the shin. He howled in pain, stumbling backward just as Gabe fired his final bullet, dropping the outlaw where he stood. Then the riders were upon them, Marshal Harris leading a posse of men from town, their guns trained on the few remaining outlaws who hadn't fled. "Sutton," the marshal called. "You alive down there?" "Still breathing," Gabe called back, a relieved smile breaking across his face. He turned to Jessamine. "Looks like our luck held." "Luck had nothing to do with it," she replied, her hands trembling now that the danger had passed. "That was all courage and skill." The cleanup took hours. 3 outlaws were dead, including the one Gabe had shot. 4 more, including Silas Reed, were captured. The rest had fled into the night, though the marshal was confident they'd round them up within days. "How did you know to come?" Jessamine asked the marshal, as he supervised the prisoners being loaded onto a wagon. "Got word from Rick at Sutton's place," the lawman explained. "Said Gabe had been gone 2 days looking after a neighbor lady who'd been threatened by the Blackwater Gang. When we saw the fire from town, I gathered every man who could ride." Jessamine looked across to where Gabe stood, talking with 2 of the posse members, his wounded arm now properly bandaged by the doctor who'd accompanied the marshal. Even exhausted and bloodied, he stood tall, his quiet strength evident in every line of his body. As though feeling her gaze, he looked up, their eyes meeting across the distance. Something warm and certain passed between them, a connection forged in danger, but promising so much more. Dawn was breaking by the time the last of the posse departed, taking the prisoners with them. Jessamine stood before the smoking ruins of her cabin, taking inventory of what remained. The barn was intact. The chicken coop had survived. Her vegetable garden was trampled but would recover. The well still stood, its stone sides blackened by smoke but otherwise undamaged. "It's not so bad," Gabe said, coming to stand beside her. "We can rebuild the cabin before winter." "We?" Jessamine asked, turning to look at him. Gabe's eyes were serious, though a smile played at the corners of his mouth. "That's what I'm proposing, yes." He took her hand gently in his. "I meant what I said in the barn, Jessamine. I've never met anyone like you, and I don't want to waste another day wondering what might be between us." Jessamine's heart beat faster. "We've only known each other 2 days, she reminded him, though her fingers tightened around his. 2 days that showed me everything I need to know about your character, your courage, your heart. He stepped closer. "I'm not saying we should rush anything. Just that I want the chance to build something with you, something stronger than any cabin, more lasting than any homestead." The sincerity in his eyes took Jessamine's breath away. All her life, she'd valued her independence above all else. Yet standing here with Gabriel Sutton, she realized that true partnership The kind her parents had shared, the kind Gabe offered, wouldn't diminish her freedom, but enhance it. "I'd like that chance too," she said softly. His smile was like sunrise breaking across the Montana sky. Slowly, giving her every opportunity to pull away, he leaned down and kissed her. Unlike their desperate kiss in the barn, this one was unhurried, deep and sweet and full of promise. When they finally parted, Gabe rested his forehead against hers. "We should get started on that cabin," he murmured. Jessamine laughed, joy bubbling up despite the destruction around them. "There's no rush," she said, her arms still around his neck. "I hear there's a nice little ranch about 2 miles east, where I might find shelter in the meantime." Gabe's answering laugh was warm against her lips. "Plenty of room there for a determined woman and her chickens," he agreed, "and a fine well where no outlaw will ever trouble you again." As the sun rose fully above the Montana mountains, Jessamine Reed stood in the circle of Gabriel Sutton's arms, looking out over land that was still hers, still full of promise. The path ahead would have challenges, she knew, but for the first time since leaving Boston, she wouldn't face them alone. "Shall we go home?" Gabe asked, offering his hand. Jessamine took it without hesitation. "Yes," she said simply. "Let's go home." Together they walked toward the horses, toward their future, leaving behind the smoldering past. And as they rode side by side across the Montana countryside, Jessamine knew that what they'd found in these past 2 days was far more valuable than any homestead they'd found in each other, the rarest treasure of the West. A true partner with whom to share both the struggles and the beauty of the frontier life they both loved.